The Maple Leafs fall in another Game 7, and it's another first-round exit. Will this finally lead to major changes within the organization? We'll discuss that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centered podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. First, got to tell you about today's show sponsor. It's Monopoly Go, the fast-paced game that lets you team up with friends in tournaments to unlock awesome prizes, unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or on the App Store. Game on. The Maple Leafs fall 2-1 in overtime in Game 7 against the Boston Bruins. David Pastrnak, welcome to the series with the series clinching goal there in overtime. And for the 7th time in 8 years, Dave, the Maple Leafs exit stage left in round 1. Where do we want to start here, man? Do we start with Game 7, I guess? What went wrong in that game to you?
The Leafs lost to the dump and chase. Full stop.
Wow.
They had no answer for it. All game, there wasn't even just the one goal, the Pastrnak goal, which was an unbelievable play. But they allowed the Bruins to establish their game early, and the Bruins had success, and they kept doing it, and they kept doing it all game long. The pressure that the Leafs were under from the start to finish, I think that's what did them in. Because games 5 and 6, you saw this Leafs team pretty much put a stranglehold on the Bruins. The Bruins couldn't generate anything.
Yeah.
They weren't able to do anything. And then in Game 7, Boston, they upped the pressure, and the Leafs couldn't handle it.
Yeah, the Boston forecheck definitely got more feisty as the game went on, and that's what the Boston special has been over the last few seasons. So they obviously knew with their backs up against the wall, they had to make a change in Game 7, and they showed a hell of a lot more urgency than they did in Games 5 and 6. But the Leafs were right there. I mean, that game did go to overtime, like Sheldon Keefe said afterwards, they put themselves in a position to only be one shot away from advancing. But unfortunately, that also meant that they put themselves one shot away from elimination. And that shot did come off the stick of David Pastrnak. And, a lot of people are watching that play and the way that it developed and the way he was able to burst into the offensive zone with zero pressure and didn't get stopped up, was able to corral speed and really just dart right from kind of his own blue line all the way down, called his shot, got an extremely fortuitous bounce off the boards. I would be shocked if Lindholm, when he passed that puck into the corner, if the whole point was bouncing it off the corner and directly landing on the stick of Pastrnak coming into the net, landing on a stick in stride. I mean, they got a really good bounce. We'll say that, a really good bounce. And Pastrnak one-on-one against Ilya Samsonov, Pasta's going to make that goal more times than not. But ultimately, it's the Leafs again, kind of shooting themselves in the foot, right? It's the few mistakes that Toronto has made, and this has been an overarching theme for many years, right? And we'll get into what Sheldon Keefe had to say in a little bit, because he kind of had a similar quote that I don't know why people thought that it was like a weird quote. It totally made sense to me, and I'll explain why. But the Maple Leafs, who you mentioned through games 5 and 6, did a really good job of staying on top of pucks, keeping guys at bay, not allowing anything off the rush. And all of a sudden, you allow one rush chance basically the entire game, and it happens to be in overtime to David Pastrnak, a clear lane to the net. And then it's curtains and the season's over. That one little mistake, not making sure that Marner got a piece of him or kept with them, or even Morgan Riley, and you can show some blame to Samsonov for not going out and playing the puck too. He's a little down on my pecking order of guys to blame on that play, to be completely honest. But it just goes to show, like, when you put yourself down in a hole like the Maple Leafs did through the first 4 games and they were down 3-1, that'd be perfect. They couldn't afford to not be. They couldn't afford to lose, and one mistake could have cost them their season, and ultimately, it was that one play, that one mistake to allow Pastrnak to come in off the rush untouched, and, it ended their season, and it's because they didn't wake up at the start of the series, and it took them until game 5 to get going.
Well, that's it too, right? They had through 4 games, they look like a team that was going to be out early.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they allowed the Bruins to establish their game. They got over emotional at parts. Their special teams were dreadful. And the goaltending edge was the Bruins had a sizable edge in goaltending, right? And then, it took them until game 5 to really start to make the adjustments that should have probably been made earlier in the series. I mean, obviously, the Joseph Woll one was a different one, but like in the way that they were playing. But then again, I don't know how many hockey games you expect to win when you're averaging less than 2 goals a game.
Yeah. You can talk about defensive play. You can talk about blown coverage. You can talk about goaltending. Samsonov should have made more stops. But at the end of the day, the real blame has to still remain on the big boys who did not get it done again. And you nailed it right there, right? How many games are you supposed to win when your power play is sub 5% and you can't score more than 2 goals in a game? They were held to 2 or less in 6 of the 7 games in this playoff series. Now it's 13 of their last 14 playoff games where they've been held to 2 or less. Like it's incredible that they were actually able to force it to game 7 with terrible offensive statistics like that. Just goes to show, how well they had to defend and how well they did defend later on in the series, and the good goaltending that they got from Joseph Woll, who unfortunately was unable to go ahead of game 7. What was going on in your mind when you saw Biz Nasty with the tweets that he made, kind of saying, bleep's about to hit the fan. I hope I'm wrong, but something's about to go. There's about to be a bomb drop, Leafs Nation. Get ready for it. And no one really knew what he was talking about. And then all of a sudden, Kipper tweets out he's hearing that Joseph Woll may not be good to go. And that did end up being the case. What was going on through your head when you saw that whole thing going on?
Well, it started with the Discord because everyone was like,
yeah,
what's going on here?
What's going on with Biz?
I thought they were talking about Austin Matthews because not too long before Biz was tweeting all that, Austin Matthews' status was being cleared up. He was expected to play and all that.
But that would have been a bomb drop. If he wasn't playing, that wouldn't have been a bomb drop.
No.
Or playing. Like, that's not a bomb,
Yeah, and then, because then I was like, I didn't read all the Biz tweets, and then I read them, and something's not right here. Then the Kiprios tweet dropped, and I know some people don't want to credit Kiprios as an insider. I do know for a fact that he has quite a few sources within the Leafs, guys that will tell him.
Played with a lot of those guys that know in the league. Of course he has.
Yeah, he's very, he knew about the Marner injury after the Boston game. He knew Marner wasn't healthy and all that. So I saw that, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
That was my initial reaction. I'm like, yep, this is about, again, game 7, there's going to be some way to throw some bad voodoo towards the Leafs' way.
It's classic Leafs luck, just can't catch a break. You finally, get a goaltender in there who's out dueling the opposition, and all of a sudden you find out that he can't go for a series deciding game 7. Has it been confirmed whether or not it was on that final second,
it
buzzer
wasn't
beater?
Confirmed, but
that's what's going around. I haven't heard that confirmed.
It's hard not to make those connections because, and they showed it right after the goal went in. Joseph Woll didn't get up right away. And I thought, okay, maybe that was just he was upset that he lost the shoutout. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Usually goaltenders quick to get up right after the fact, or maybe he thought the game was over. But I was so mad. I'm just because I kept saying to myself, on a nothing play, literally a nothing play,
It was very similar to remember Ryan O'Reilly had blocked the shot from Victor Hedman at the end of one of the games last
Oh,
year.
yeah.
It was never reported, but a lot of people in the media kind of picked up on it. I believe that shot broke his foot because the first few games of that series prior to that shot block, he was an animal against Tampa Bay. And then that happened. And there's, multiple people speculating, and there were some people who caught some visuals in the room um, that believe that broke his foot and he wasn't the same the rest of the series. It's just like the Leafs had awful luck throughout this series. I mean,
Hmm.
you go right from games 1 through 7, something happened, right? Games 1, 2, and 3, you get no William Nylander because he's got migraines out of nowhere. Like, the
That
guy plays
caused
all
vision
82
issues.
games. Guy plays 82 games all year long, and out
Yeah.
of nowhere, he's got migraines and can't play for 3 games. And then in game 4, Austin Matthews ends up getting is sick or whatever, and then gets hurt, and then he misses the third period in game 4, misses game 5, misses game 6, and then you think, okay, Austin Matthews is coming back. They've got a healthy Nylander. He just came off a 2-goal performance. He's back to being a play driver. Are the stars finally aligning for the Maple Leafs? They got a young stud goalie who seems to be outplaying the guy on the other side. No. The hockey gods can't let Toronto have nice things. So they had one more curveball to throw us, and yeah, that was Joseph Woll's not actually going to play in Game 7. It's going to be Ilya Samsonov, the guy who was on waivers back in December. That's a cheap shot because you know what, Samsonov actually played great in that game. I will give him the credit he deserves. He gave the Leafs every chance to win. He gave up 1 goal through regulation, 1 goal through 60 minutes. It was a bit of a soft goal, really
It
one
was
that
a
he would
brutal
want
goal.
back. I'll say that, but he also did make some big stops. There's no way that anybody could put this loss on Ilya Samsonov. Goaltending was not the reason why this team was sent home in the first round again. We'll go back to it time and time again, and we'll come back and we'll chat about it more. But it was scoring, or the lack of goal scoring, and the fact that they could not score more than 2 goals a game in 6 of the 7 outings. That ultimately was the biggest downfall for the Maple Leafs, the lack of offense. A team that is predicated on paying guys millions and millions of dollars up front to be big-time goal scorers and playmakers, but then can't get squat from them come playoff time. We'll chat about what might be coming next for the team on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you need and what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, we're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you here on the show. The Leafs season is over. They fall 4 games to 3 in the best of 7 to the Boston Bruins for the 4th time in 11 years. They failed to close out a deciding Game 7 against the Boston Bruins, which is just insane that it continues to happen time after time after time. I will say, though, don't fret. The Locked On Leafs podcast will continue to be a daily podcast throughout the duration of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We've got so much we got to get into with the Toronto Maple Leafs. What's in store. what's the cap situation next year. We'll have the draft to look forward to, some free agents. We're going to do our player grades for the whole season. We'll look back on, what we had as our preseason predictions. How did those stack up throughout the year? There's so much more to get to over the course of the next few weeks. So don't think that because the Leaf season is over, we're done providing you guys daily content, because we're going to bring it to you, and we'll follow along and do some more NHL stuff and talk about what's going on in the playoffs right now as well throughout the next 6 weeks or so. But we'll continue to break down Game 7, break down this series loss and the end of the road for this year's Maple Leafs team for today. Tomorrow, or I guess today, for those at the time of listening to this, the team is going to be doing their exit meetings. The player meetings will be held with the end of season media availability today. We will comb through the audio and we'll come back and we'll kind of break it down on tomorrow's show. So that's what will be in store for tomorrow. And then on Thursday, it appears that the Maple Leafs front office will speak. So they're not going to talk today. It's just going to be the coach and the players. And then on Thursday, management will chat. And I think that's kind of notable, Dave. I don't know about you, but the fact that Brendan Shanahan won't be there right next to Brad Treliving, or Brad Treliving won't be there right next to Sheldon Keefe. Like typically when it was back in the day where you had Keefe, Dubas, and Shanny all together, all on the same page, they did their end of media avails together. That doesn't appear to be what's happening this year.
Yeah, and it's we're already getting the off season off to a flaming start, let's just say, because a lot of things are being thrown out there. And look, it's hard not to see that and say, very curious. And like, that when those things are put out there, they're not put out there for no reason as well. And you also have to figure the time in between. It's really significant, right? Like we're talking multiple days.
Yeah, a whole like 2 days in between. Good math.
Because like 2 days, I can't remember what they did last year with Shanahan and Dubas.
There was a couple days in between last year.
Yeah,
there was.
There was
weird.
Yeah, and so that really gets you thinking. And we know that the heat, there's going to be a lot more heat on Shanahan, just based off the fact that everyone's talking about this new MLSC boss.
Yeah,
and that's going to be, I think, the wild card here.
Well, Dave, I mean, you look at what this group has done over the course of the Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Brendan Shanahan era. They're 1-8 in 9 playoff rounds. 1-8. Like that's terrible. Like that is just not good enough for a team that expects to be competitive for a Stanley Cup each year, and they can't even win a round. They finally did win one round last year, but then absolutely no-showed in round 2, and it cost the general manager their job. I mean, I don't know. I think there was a lot on the line here, and yep. I think when you look at how the series played out, credit to the Leafs for battling back and forcing a Game 7 and giving them a chance to extend their season. But ultimately, listening to a lot of the post game on Saturday, you heard a lot of the same buzzwords that you've been hearing over the last few years. And we're so close. We're right there. We're knocking on the door. The problem is you haven't gotten there yet, and time's up. And there has to be consequences for not getting there. You know what I mean? Like, how many times can they continually run this thing back? Like, every single player was asked about it. And I mean, what are they going to say? No, we need to trade somebody. Like, I guess they're not going to, but they all said they want another chance, another opportunity. What I will say was interesting is when Sheldon Keefe was asked if he felt that they could get it done with this group or if he saw anything, there was a long pause. I don't know if you listened to the full availability, but there was at least like a 6-second pause before he delivered his answer to that question. I thought that was very telling because I think he realizes that there's nothing else he can do to get this team going and get this team motivated. So if it's not a new voice in the room, then it has to be one of those core 4 players moving. Like, there's no way they could run it back similarly to the way that they did this previous year. There's just no shot.
Well, and to me, I think he also realizes, look, this core is as locked down as it can be, at least for the next year after this, right? With no movement clauses kicking in.
Yeah. I mean, you can maneuver, pal.
I mean, look, you can go up to a player and say, we think it's time to move on, but it's ultimately up to the player to to say, yeah, I'll waive it to do it, right?
Yes, of course.
And for Keefe, I think it's the realization that this has been year after year after year, and he's answering the same question year after year after year. And yeah, defeated. He sounded defeated multiple times in this series, especially after game 4.
After game 4, yeah.
Right? And we know that who did I say were the top 2 guys that had the most pressure? Shanahan, Keefe, then I had Marner. Or sorry, I had Samsonov, then Marner. Like, there's a reason for that, because you get a new general manager, but it's not even the general managers. Again, I'm going to point to Keith Pelly again. They bring in a new guy that the whole team now has to be accountable to this guy. He's coming in new here, and he's probably going to be like, Shanahan, this is 10 years. We're not talking about a couple years. We're talking 10 years. He got a grace period when he joined this team because he had to rebuild. Remember?
Right?
Scorched earth.
Stripped it down.
Earth.
Yeah.
It takes time to build it back up, but he's got 10 years on the job, and what does he have to show for? Like, you talk to anybody about what happened, every single person I've talked to, like, it's like they're immune to the pain. Like, there's pain, but it's not like they're gonna like lose their what over it. It's
gotten to a point of apathy, which is the worst place to get to in sports when your fan base is like, yeah, of course there was hype and people were excited about a game 7 and the possibility of going into the second round, but then the second the Pasternak scored, it's like, yeah, of course. Like, of course, like that was going to happen. Like it wasn't even worth getting angry over.
No, I didn't,
because it's like, this was always going to happen. This is what they always do. They always, rip your heart out when you start to get a sliver of hope. And we talked about that going into the game. It's like, they played well, in games 5 and 6 gives you that chance, but this is usually when they run into the bus. And that's exactly, what happened. In a way, I mean, they still played well in game 7. It's not like they no-showed, which you got to give them credit for, but they weren't able to get it done. They didn't have the killer instinct to get that one final goal to when they finally did score to, just completely, shut things down and not allow them to. I mean, you in a game where it's scoreless through the first 50 minutes and you finally score the first goal of the hockey game, you can't go a minute and a half without allowing them to score. Like, you can't shut things down. You already went 50 minutes.
And at that point is where I'm
later.
like, at that point, I knew, I'm like, yeah, I don't see this team pulling it off. That was my belief, because the Bruins got back into it, and Jeremy Swayman's going to go, I'm not allowing another goal.
Yeah, Edmondson, almost.
Oh, I will say this, Joel Edmondson. If there's someone who should be pissed about that loss more than Leafs fans, is Joel Edmondson. He had a perfect 5-0 record in game 7s.
I know.
And he did everything he could to try to win that game, turning into an offensive two-way guy in this game, landing that huge hit on Pasternak. Yeah. He was a warrior in that game.
He was good. And look, we've got a few weeks to discuss what the future is for Joel Edmondson here in Toronto. But I think there'd be interest in keeping him, I guess, as just a quick little foresight into what we might be talking about over the next couple of weeks. But I think ultimately the when we talk about keeping Edmondson, that's not the main question. It's up higher than that, right? And I think there's a few other individuals that the conversation is going to revolve around. Does Brendan Shanahan come back? Does Sheldon Keefe come back? Does Mitch Marner come back? John Tavares come back? Those are the four guys that a lot of people are going to have questions about. Why don't we take one more break, come back, and maybe talk a little bit about that and maybe what we think might or should happen over the course of the next couple of months here as this Maple Leafs team might be heading in a new direction. So we'll have that chat on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. All right, game off. We got to pause here and talk a little bit more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together, build up each other's boards. There are more things that you can win together and the more awesome prizes that you can unlock. There's so much to get. You can get unique stickers, cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash your buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti reacting to the Maple Leafs 2-1 overtime loss to the Boston Bruins, eliminating Toronto from the Stanley Cup playoffs. Round one now officially in the books, by the way, which means, Dave, our contest is coming to a close. So if anyone is still around at the 27-minute mark listening to this podcast and has yet to submit the form or fill out the form to win themselves an Austin Matthews jersey, do so now, because today is the last day to get in those submission forms. So once again, you'll find those in the show notes down below. Fill out the necessary contact information so that we can get a hold of you if you are the lucky winner of the jersey. And we will be doing that draw rather soon, I would imagine. But today is going to be the last day. Yeah, at some point this week. But today's going to be the last day for those to submit their applications, and make sure that you are subscribed to us on YouTube and also wherever you get your podcast from audio-wise as well. And reminder, we're still going to be bringing you daily Maple Leafs-centric podcasts throughout the rest of the season and even through the offseason. So always keep our pod in the rotation. That would be greatly appreciated. All right, Dave. What's next? Like this core can't possibly get one more kick at the can, I would imagine. So when I guess like if you're power ranking guys who you think will not be with the team next season, who are like the top four guys who you think are most in jeopardy in terms of the top guys, obviously? Like the core 4 or 5 can throw in Morgan Riley, the GM, the coach, and Brendan Shanahan. But who are the guys at the top that you think should be worried the most that their place in this organization could be in jeopardy?
So I'll go from high, like top to bottom. So
Yeah.
I think Sheldon Keefe is number 1. I think Mitch Marner's number 2.
Okay.
I think John Tavares was number 3. I'll put Morgan Riley 4. I'll go Willie 5, and I'll go Austin Matthews 6.
So hang on, where's Shanny?
Oh, sorry. Let's put Shanny. We'll put Shanny. Let's put Shanny second.
Shanny's number 1 for me.
I think him and Keefe are kind of de facto 1A, 1B in this scenario.
See, I don't. I actually think there's a better chance Keefe sticks than Shanny.
I just don't think my thing is Shanahan. You definitely could say he's gone. I don't know how Sheldon Keefe remains, in my opinion.
I think you can look at the way that they finally bought into playing a system that works in game 5 and 6 and look at that and say, all right, he knows what he's and hey, I don't know about you. I thought Sheldon Keefe, for the first time ever, actually outcoached the other team's coach. Like he outcoached Jim Montgomery. Like the things that he was doing in Game 7 to yes, Austin Matthews returned, but he didn't break up the top 6 lines. He liked the way that they looked, so he kept them together. Brought in Austin Matthews to anchor his own third line with Yarncroc and Pontus Holmberg. But the way that he was very calculated in getting him extra time, putting him up randomly in situational spots up in on the top line with Marner or with Bertuzzi or with Nylander, just to get those extra offensive shifts. I thought that was really smart of him to do. It didn't pay off ultimately. They did not generate goals that way. But I did think that actually it did, because the goal that happened was, Bertuzzi, Matthews and Willie. So it did actually kind of come to fruition a little bit there. But I think for sure you can look at Sheldon as a coach and say, all right, there were signs that they finally, I don't know, were playing a style that he wanted them to play. But ultimately, I just think that Shanny wears it the most. Like it's not even that I want to sit here and defend Sheldon, because it is tough to do, and I probably would lean that he also gets let go, but I do, like, I was trying to play devil's advocate there, to be completely honest with you. But Shanny, I think, is even more so at fault because he's been here the longest, and he's the one, to me, like last year, we talked about how this team needed to make a change last year on the ice. They didn't. And what it sounded like to us, we'll never know this unless Kyle Dubas writes a book one day or talks about it one day. But it sounded like to us that Dubas made the realization that this core can't get it done last year.
Yeah.
And it sounded as though in his end of year presser, for the first time ever, he was sounding as though he was willing to make a change to the core four, that this group might not be able to get it done. And then he was fired a couple days later. And then reports come out, Chris Johnson.
Well, technically, his contract was not going to be renewed.
Yeah,
it wasn't technically a firing.
He was given a contract extension, which was later pulled from him. So
yes,
you can call it whatever you want. He was no longer asked to be the general manager of this hockey team.
Yeah, they moved in a different direction.
Because of a difference of opinion.
Yes,
which was Shanny thought this team could win. Right? We can and we will. I know that was a Dubas statement. But
that was a Dubas statement. But Shanahan's was, we can't do something different. We can't just do something different hoping it'll change things. Like it was something like,
for the sake of doing something different, right?
Yeah,
it had to make
for the sake
sense.
of doing something different.
And sure, I agree with that to an extent. But there was going to be a lot of heat on him this season if it didn't work out, right? Like the change, like last summer, making the change in the front office when everyone knew there had to be a change made on the ice as well, that put a target on his back. Like, all right, you've fired off your bullet. You've fired the general manager and brought in a new guy. If this doesn't work and this doesn't happen, I think that's all on you now at this point. And that's where I still am going to hold the blame for Brendan Shanahan for having the conviction in that core four, and it turned out to be the wrong conviction at the end of the day. And I think there's got to be consequences for that. 10 years of belief in this group, and it's been 10 years that's been wasted. Wasted, Dave. Like 10 years, and they've won one series. They're 1-8 in 9 playoff series since this group has gotten together and made the playoffs in Marner Matthews' rookie season. It's just not good enough. At all. And I think there need to be repercussions for that. And I believe that Brendan Shanahan, in my opinion, is right at the top when we play the blame game for that.
I don't disagree with that. I don't.
Yes, you did, because you put him second.
I still put him near the top, at least. Well, what I'll say here is, the Shanahan part, I think it's, again, you see the fact that
the Shanaplan failed.
The Shanaplan hasn't worked. Dubas realized the Shanahan plan wasn't working, but at the same time, He was a part of that Shanaplan. He could have easily have, at times, if possible, I don't know how much power he really had because of those reports. At times, says, you know what? Maybe we're putting ourselves going in the wrong direction with this Shanaplan. That's a conversation for a different day. My thing with Keefe, yes, he made good adjustments later in the series, especially when the team needed to make the adjustments. It still doesn't, in my opinion.
Were they adjustments or was it buy-in from the team? Like, honestly, I think Keefe tried to get the team to play that way for years, but he never actually had the horses. And this year he finally did. It just took them till game 5 to buy in.
Okay,
So is
but
that on the coach or is that on the players?
well, in my opinion, it's both. Like you got,
Sure. Yeah.
I think,
Ultimately, yes. Correct.
right? The power play was stagnant. The Bruins going into this series realized their power play wasn't working, so they broke it up. They made significant changes to how the teams play, the power play was structured,
Yeah.
both in personnel and maybe style. Keefe didn't do that. He was just kind of hoping it was going to work itself out. To me, that's not good enough. It was an issue going into the series. This isn't like through the playoffs. This was an issue. This was an issue well before the playoffs. They had chances in the regular season after they clinched the playoff round with the power play not doing well. That's when you go and you try to fix it, because that really, in my opinion, that's something the coach has to recognize and fix.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like Guy Boucher is the power play coach. So
yeah, but the head coach has a lot to say in what the assistants do.
For sure, I'm saying he wears a lot of that as
well.
Oh,
they both the whole coaching staff with the way this special teams. It's the entire coaching staff. Like, I'm not putting it all on Keefe.
Yeah,
that's
4.8% on the power play, 64% on the penalty kill.
It's embarrassing.
It's god awful.
The only team that was worse was the LA Kings, who had 0% on the power play.
Like, this is why it's actually astonishing that the Maple Leafs, with a 4.8% power play, a 64% penalty kill, and they only scored more than 2 goals one time, somehow made it to a game 7.
Yeah,
it's actually astonishing. When you
well,
think
the
about
5-on-5 play was good, was pretty good. But in my opinion, if you bring back Keefe, look, I'm all for you. They have enough justified reason to letting Brendan Shanahan go. But if you keep Keefe, you're spinning the same wheel too. In my opinion, you're only doing half the job I think that's needed.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about that is, and I like I said, if I had to make a wager, I think that it would be favored that he's fired than kept. I will say that. However, he was given an extension last year after sitting down with Brad Treliving, and it's not like it came right away. Like, he had to convince Treliving that he was good enough to coach this team. So they established a relationship, and I do wonder if the way that the team finally bought in those final 3 games, if that was enough to convince Treliving, all right, if we get him more of the right guys, right, maybe he can be the guy who can lead them. Like, I liked what I saw towards the end of the series, and I blame more the players on how they failed to execute than how the coaches failed to prepare them.
But I also just think the coach, the way they prepare, the way they adjust and get the players ready for these games also plays a factor too. It's not, but this wasn't just a one playoff thing. It's multiple. He could have told Brad Treliving, I need this. In order for me to be successful, I need this.
I mean, you can say all you need. I mean, yeah, go and get me Victor Hedman. I'm sure he would love a Victor Hedman. How's that going to work? Like, you could, what was he going to say? I need this.
I need a puck mover on the blue line. I need someone that's going to shoot from the blue line on the power play. They went and got John Klingberg for a reason. That was probably something he had asked for. It just was the wrong guy, right? But at the end of the day, I just think that a coach has a shelf life. of how long he has until you finally say we've done all we can.
Yeah.
At this rate.
I just think it's weird the situation that they're in because Keith Pelly comes in, the new CEO, and he's got to make a decision. Okay, the GM's 1 year in, so probably not going to get sign off on removing him because that would not make sense.
No.
So I can remove the president, but then the president won't be able to pick his own guys, and it's really bizarre. Which is why I always thought that if you were going to give this team one more kick at the can, like firing Dubas made no sense. But the Leafs put themselves in this position. Ultimately,
well, it's the president that put them in this position, right?
The president put them in themselves in this position. So he's, the guy who I think is right up at the top of the list for, who should be feeling the most heat this week. So I'll be curious to see what happens there for sure. I think there's a lot of pressure, lots of pressure on Brendan Shanahan because ultimately it comes down to this. It's as simple as this, Dave. The Shanaplan failed.
Yep.
The Shanaplan failed. And there's got to be consequences. And after a decade, a new president in MLSE, there's no better time than now to make that change. Now, what that new president is going to come in, how sweeping changes he's going to make in year one, I don't know. The GM came in and he needed a year to see what's up with these guys before, maybe making some sweeping changes. Maybe a president sees it the same way. I don't know. I really don't. Although I would imagine if you're coming in as the president, you probably would have a little bit more of an idea of what you want to do. But
I think if they end up going in that direction, whoever they're bringing in, likely have already had some talks about what they would look to do.
Possibly. Yeah, probably. I would imagine. What those things could be, well, that's stuff that we can be chatting about over the next couple of weeks here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. But do you have any final words? Final words as we close out the series, close out the season, anything else that you want to say before we move on here and close this podcast out?
We'll see what happens this week. We're going to have lots of time. We're going to keep going with it, but we'll have lots of time to go over it.
We certainly will. We didn't really even touch on, I guess, the players at fault, but again, we can get to that.
They're going to be talking tomorrow. We can just look at what they say tomorrow and go.
That's what I think. Yeah. So tomorrow, or today, for those who are listening, the media will be speaking with the players. So we'll kind of break down the audio, try and decipher what they mean by the incredibly unthoughtful answers that they typically give, but we'll see if we can get some cryptic messages pulled from any of them, and we'll kind of break it all down on tomorrow's show. And then again Thursday, management speaking. Didn't say who, they just said management. Who that entails, guess we'll find out on Thursday. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms, including up on YouTube, and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Again, we're a year-round podcast, so just because the Leafs are out doesn't mean that we're going to stop providing daily Maple Leafs coverage for all of you Leafs Nation listening to this podcast out there. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.